Hello anime fan, welcome back to What If Animes 2.0. So in this video you gonna see, what if Naruto was born in Rwby and built a harem? This is part 2. And if you want more, then hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. So let's get in the video and do check out the author of the story. Father of spells. The bow was heavy in Naruto's hands. Planting his feet in the castle courtyard, he grunted thoughtfully and hefted it in both hands, idly strengthening his stance as he adjusted his grip on his latest treasured tool. Thankfully this one didn't buck or break in his hands like the last 8. The weight, while stolid, remained balanced as he took aim at the sky. Only natural, really, he'd constructed the weapon as such for that very purpose. It was a large wrought iron creation, slender, yet nearly as large as he was tall. That was saying something, given his age. At nearly 9 years of age now, he'd grown rather tall and was well on his way to mastering his magic, as well as the things he created with said magic. Still, that didn't preclude him from making works of art with said magic. Forged in a manner hereto unknown to anyone but him and burnished with a special string that would slice through the fingers of anyone found unworthy, it was a tool like any other, albeit one that would only ever respond to his whims. After all, what was the point in having a weapon that anyone could use? Answer: there was none. He was hardly out to make weapons of war, mind you, but rather tools of the trade. For now said tools were safest in his hands, and his hands alone. Besides, a bow suited him just fine given his age. He couldn't properly wield a sword and shield just yet given his lack of muscle, let alone an axe or polearm. Maybe a mace if he braved the darn thing with both hands, but a halberd, scythe, or whip were wholly out of the question. In that regard, a bow was an equitable compromise, far better than a staff or a rapier, though he professed to have some skill in both thanks to Schnee. Say what you would about the elf girl, but Rizar Schnee was a deft hand with the latter these days. Speedy, sneaky Schnee. Stick him with the pointy end was all well and good, yet unlike her, he wasn't about to let his enemies get close. He'd made that mistake in his last life, constantly throwing himself into close combat, not because he had to, but rather because it was all he knew. He'd become something of a brawler, and by the time he finally developed a proper ranged arsenal in the form of his Rasen Shuriken, truth-seeking orbs and Bijudama Misyu Kurama, he already had too many bad habits ingrained in him to use them when he should. He'd paid the price for that. Died because of it. Ergo, testing the string, he took a step further forward into the courtyard and considered the sky before him, sunny and bright, with only a single stray cloud to mar today's perfection. For lack of any other visible foe, he made that cloud his target. He'd learned from his mistake last time. This time there would be no such error. Come on, it wasn't as though anyone would miss a cloud now, would they? From there, he inhaled deeply and drew it back, squinting against the afternoon sun. Just to be safe, he made certain to aim high and well away from the castle, placing the farming fields at his back rather than directly in his path. It had been a proper pain using weather magic to get rid of all that ash in the air, and he was in no hurry to revisit his incident, lest he get another telling off from Dad. Mumbling under his breath, he drew the string further back, visualizing the arrow he wanted to create in his mind's eye. A brisk breath of steam fled from his lips as he exhaled, eyes gleaming gold. I am the bone of my sword. Incantations, that is to say the art of crafting a spell and strengthening its existence in this world with words, worked wonderfully. Alliteration, thy name is not Naruto or Nero, as he went in this life. It was a deceptively simple concept, really, even a child could do it. For instance, if one were casting a water spell and reinforced it with the words, water form swirls and pierce, for said spell, ya know, you'd end up with a much more powerful version of the magic you were trying to create. Some incantations were longer or shorter, depending on the strength of said spell you were trying to create. Push back, repel the vile knave, would result in a strengthened telekinetic shove against your enemy. It was no tried and true Shinra Tensei to be sure, but still useful when you wanted to get some distance. Likewise, the focused command, bind this wandering knave, would bind someone in place. And those were only the most basic of spells he'd concocted. Strangely enough, Dad didn't use incantations for some reason. Mom was still away on her trip to the northern continent Solitas, as he'd come to call it, so he hadn't a chance to ask her, either. And while her spells were powerful, they all seemed kinda basic, ya know? Had he invented something new? No way. Surely this was common knowledge. Right? In his case, it was easier to take his chakra and magic, meld them together and make something much more direct. And infinitely more dangerous. Opening his right hand, he visualized what he wanted and conjured an item to his hand. A small spiraling sword that he in turn set to the string and drew back, forcing it to expand, stretching into the rough shape of an arrow. Scarlet sparks skittered around his fingers, bled into the blade, threatened to bend the bow he even now held. A grin split his face as his fingers struggled to hold the sword arrow in place. It wanted to be used, no, more than that, it longed to be unleashed. A weapon like this needed a name, didn't it? On a whim, he hearkened back to the tale of a sacred sword he'd discovered in an old storybook, one read to him by Dad. With a thread of breath, he whispered its name. Khalidbalg. Thus speaking, he let the arrow fly. He was not disappointed. Not at all. A deafening sonic boom simultaneously shattered the ground underfoot and pierced the heavens all at once as he unleashed his arrow. That stray cloud high above summarily evaporated into wispy shreds of pale white as the sword missile vanished across the horizon. This time, there was no mountain to stop his attack. It kept going until it vanished from sight, streaking across the sea, where he prayed it would land with a harmless splash. If not, well, that thing was gonna ruin someone's day the next continent over. It would be fine, right? Right? Khalidbalg crossed the sea in an instant and crashed down into the Bronwyn tribe like the fist of an angry god. That day, their fear of their dark mistress intensified tenfold. Praise be Salem. Meh, Naruto shrugged, hoping otherwise. What are the chances of it hitting someone? It'll be fine. A hand clamped down on his shoulder. Are you sure about that, young master? Gaw? Sneaky Schnee. Jolting with a startled hiss, he pivoted in place to glare at the maid in question. In the year since he'd blown up a mountain and accidentally acquired her services, Schnee had truly come into her own. Moreover, she actually looked healthy now. Her long white hair shone with a lovely luster. Once drooping pointed ears now perked and alert, bright blue eyes half-lidded with amusement. These days she wore a dark blue combat outfit replete with white frills and a combat skirt, like most of the maid's staff. A slender metal rapier hung from her hip and a many-pronged silver snowflake pinned just shy of her collarbone to indicate her station. Dad and his darn symbols. He'd never understand them. Still, so long as she was happy. URK. She was staring at him, though. How much of that did you hear? Her pointed ears wiggled happily. Hear what? Was she playing dumb? If so, why? Naruto squinted at her. She smiled back, eyes closed. I still can't tell what she's thinking. Such a strange girl. Even now he found it somewhat alarming just how quickly Schnee taken to him. There had been a period of uncertainty as the elf girl. Was she really a faunus? Adjusted to her new duties, but all things considered, she'd acclimated rather well. Apparently he'd done a favor in taking her in, given she was an orphan with no parents, something he hadn't known beforehand. As such, the castle staff were more than happy to accept her as one of their own, and she'd truly come into her own. He'd happily accept her slightly obsessive nature over her being openly distrustful. After all, one slightly crazy friend was better than no friends at all. No, even if she's my maid. Salem Mom would probably be over the moon to meet her when she returned. If she returned, stop that. Naruto shook his head fiercely, banishing such thoughts before they could take root. Dad had gone on long expeditions before, and he'd always returned in one piece. Mom was sturdier still. There must be a reason she was taking so long. Maybe she had a surprise planned or something. Great, now he was worried. Most of Mom's surprises were spectacular to say the least. Young Master Nero? He came back to himself just in time to find Schnee's face inches from his. She laid a hand on his forehead and hummed thoughtfully, blue eyes peering deeply into his own. Are you feeling well? When he didn't react to her provocation, she removed her hand, placed it upon his shoulder and pressed her head to his. Do you perhaps have a fever? Any normal 9-year-old prince would have sputtered and blushed at such close contact, shoved her away, then started crying about cooties. He wasn't a child, hadn't been one for quite some time now. Even if he did suffer the occasional emotional lapse, and as amusing as it might be to perpetuate the ruse with her, he simply didn't care to. Not with her. With a patient sigh he batted her hand down and drew back, placing some much-needed distance between the two of them. "I'm fine, Schnee." A fleeting flicker of disappointment flashed across the young girl's pale visage, there and gone before he could think to comment on it. He wondered why she was upset. Was it something he'd said? Regardless, she soon smoothed her expression into one of quiet complacency, inclined her head, and sketched a polite curtsy. She'd gotten better at those, he noted. "As you say, young master." Stowing his bow over one shoulder, he planted his right hand on his hip and stared her down until she raised her gaze again. "Was there something you wanted?" Schnee shook her head, setting her long hair swaying for a moment as she met his gaze. "I was merely doing as your father bid, young master." The time was still suspicious. Naruto quirked a pale brow at her. "And what might that be?" An innocuous blink followed the first. "Making sure you're healthy, of course." "By staring at me?" "Yes." Naruto dragged a hand down his face. Dad wasn't giving her ideas again, was he? He must have. Because now the poor girl was pouting for some reason. Or maybe he'd done something to upset her and not realized. That settled it. Girls were confusing. He didn't think he'd ever truly understand them, no matter how many times he was reborn. Still, he had to do something before she took it into her head that she'd offended him. He'd accidentally made her cry once. Never again. There, step back in, he patted the smaller girl's head. "You're doing just fine." Much to his surprise, Schnee latched onto his wrist with both hands and held it there, keeping his fingers fixed firmly atop her scalp as she stared sullenly at the floor. "Fine isn't enough." Her voice trembled with worrying fervor, a sentiment he had grown all too familiar with. "I need to be perfect." "No one's perfect, Schnee." She wouldn't meet his gaze. "Not even your parents?" "Not even them," he snorted, trying not to laugh. "Especially not them. That's heresy." She mumbled under her breath. "You shouldn't say such things of the king and queen. The gods will hear you." He scoffed in the face of her fear. "Then call me a heretic. I'm their only son. What are they gonna do, banish me?" "I think not." Schnee shushed him hurriedly, to no avail. Of course. He'd almost forgotten, hadn't he? It was so easy to forget. Everyone practically worshipped Salem and Ozma as gods, divinity incarnate, heaven sent from above. Their continent was one of the few bastions of order left in all of Remnant, one that was looking to expand, at that. Someday they might become emperor and empress of the world for all he knew. To call them gods though, no. Just no. Nothing could be further from the truth. Yes, Salem and Ozma were immortal. Yes, his parents possessed incredible powers. Yes, they'd become undoubtedly strong. But they weren't divine. Did a goddess accidentally burn a roast goose and serve the charred remains up for dinner with a chagrined smile on her face? Did a god accidentally put his tunic and trousers on backwards then trip over his own 2 feet down the stairs? Did a goddess or god make complete fools of themselves whenever his birthday came around? A small, rueful smile tugged at the corner of his mouth at that thought. Oh yes, his parents were many things, with many facets, and in many ways the center of his world. But they were not, nor would they ever be gods. Of course, he couldn't make Schnee understand that. How could she, when she'd only been in the castle for a year? In the end, he shook his head. There are no gods here, Schnee. Not anymore. Don't try to be like them. You'll just waste your time. Her lips pursed in a thin line as her fingers bit into his. Then, if I can't be perfect, I'll get as close as I can, he laughed. And that means seeing to my every need, does it? Yes. Naruto inhaled deeply and bit back on a sigh, turning it into a cough instead. Rizar Schnee was still a child after all. Even if she didn't act like it most the time, she at least had an excuse for it, having 2 years on him. He himself had no such excuse, while his new body might be childish, his mind remained very much that of a young man, and though he'd since sharpened it through these last few years of training, there were still things in this world that he didn't understand. He could be honest about that, accept it and move on. Schnee, meanwhile, could not. She was trying so hard to be the adult she wasn't, and became deeply frustrated when she failed to assume the role she'd chosen for herself. In that regard he couldn't help but baby her. It was his nature. Still, maybe her earnest, hard-working nature wasn't entirely a bad thing. Tousling her hair, he made a snap decision. Schnee. She blinked once but didn't waver. My lord, would you like to learn magic? Her eyes fluttered shut and open again in a rapid blink. That's impossible. The gods, He pushed a finger against her lips, shushing her in return as she had unto him. I decide what's possible, not them. Surely it couldn't be that hard. He had magic for days. It wasn't as though he was giving it to her, but using a small bit of his own energy her to unlock her potential. These people might not have the blood of Ozma and Salem running through them, but they had something slumbering deep within them. Call it an aura if you will, a mere shadow of his own power, a semblance of what once was. He could sense it, just as he could so many things. But how to draw it out? Maybe with an incantation. That might work. Best be careful though, you couldn't go mucking about with someone's soul and not expect consequences. Schnee perked up suddenly, tensing under his hand. Lord Nero. Someone is watching us. Finally noticed, had she? A lopsided smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. I know. He'd become aware of their unwanted guest 5 minutes ago. She blinked, startled. You noticed it as well, then? Anything I noticed is secondary. He flicked her forehead, slung an arm over her shoulder and steered her away from the entrance to the courtyard, careful not to let their would-be voyeur catch on. What's important is that you noticed something. You've been practicing, haven't you? She managed a quick nod and tried to turn. Yes, but shouldn't we? Shush, he hummed. Don't let them realize the game's up just yet. Without turning his head, his gaze slid to the left, eyeing the castle ramparts above, their dark stone silhouetted against the sun. You'll spoil all the fun. Gauging his steps, he made certain to place himself and Schnee firmly between the hidden observer and the courtyard exit. Then, louder now, he raised his voice, allowing their eager eavesdropper to overhear them once more. All I am is a prince, a ramen lover, and a magic maniac. Despite that, until recently, my senses weren't all that sharp. But yours are. The life you led outside the castle, dodging death every day, that's resulted in you having something you don't, a sensitivity to danger. It's a remarkable thing. So speaking, he turned his head fully toward the castle ramparts. Wouldn't you agree? A pall of silence fell over the courtyard. Schnee tucked herself into his side, trying to push him behind her, but he wasn't having it. He dug his feet in and stared at the nearest balustrade on the castle walls, fixed firmly at the tall stack of crates wedged against it, left forgotten by the guards during their duties. Not by him. Give us the silent treatment, eh? Naruto kept staring, one hand inching towards the bow on his back as he craned his head toward the nearest parapet. You did a decent job concealing your presence and intent. I'll give you that, but you can't hide your scent, ya know. With his free hand, he tapped his nose. Not from me. Someone moved behind the boxes. You don't have to hide, ya know. Whatever business you have with me, we can talk it over. Just come on out. His smile thinned. Or I can blast you out of there. Your choice. No response, so be it. Draw his bow, he conjured 3 wrought iron arrows to the string, drawing the latter back with intent. The sound echoed out over the empty courtyard. Where were the guards? As he drew a bead on his target. Inhaling in quiet annoyance, he planted his feet and moved his hips, careful to place himself firmly between Schnee and the stake of crates. Last chance tilde. Movement flickered in his peripherals. Naruto let the arrows fly as one. Sure enough, they decimated the stacked crates in a shower of splinters. However, in the same instant he heard Schnee cry out behind him in surprise. For her, at least. Not so him. By the time the knife stabbed out at his face, it tasted only empty air. He'd already begun moving the moment he released the bowstring. Pivoting on his right heel, he took up his great bow in both hands, swept his loyal mate aside, and brought it crashing down like a righteous hammer on the head of their attacker. It was a very heavy bow. The results were thus. Clonk. A man's pained grunt accompanied by the dull crunch of a fractured skull were his reward. In no time at all, he found himself gazing down at a dazed fellow garbed entirely in black from head to toe sprawled out at his feet. Much of their face was concealed by a dark cloth and a hood besides, further obscuring their identity from his curious gaze. You're 100 years too early to try assassinating me. He patted the man's cheek almost affectionately. Good try, though. Tutting softly, he tore away the hood and half-mask away in short order to reveal. Yeah, he had no idea who this was. The would-be assassin was a slim fellow, all things considered, with a sullen countenance, of green hair, beady eyes, brown, pallid visage bearing an X-shaped scar across his right cheek. Didn't exactly look like the charitable sort, ya know? He was quite stunned for the moment, but already he could see him coming around. A quick pat on the cheek expedited it. At length, those dazed eyes focused on him. How did you? Naruto crouched down before him, idly resting on his haunches. 10. The man blinked, not quite comprehending his words, much less their meaning. What? You're the 10th person to try and kill me this year alone, he explained, idly muffling a yawn with the back of his one hand. Really, it's become a rite of passage now than anything else. An idle chuckle escaped him as the mangled man before him growled impotently. The one before you was an old woman, can you believe that? Crazy Biddy gave me a poisoned apple. He tutted at the memory. Gave me one hell of a stomachache, I'll give her that, but I've dealt with worse. Do you know what I did with her? His would-be murderer snarled. Killed her? Naruto smiled. It was all teeth. She works in the kitchens now. Makes a mean meatloaf. The man's jaw clicked open, unable to accept what he'd just been told. Huh? Under strict supervision, of course. Naruto patted the man's messy head affectionately, drawing an irate growl from him. Wouldn't do for her to get ideas. That said, she's been on her best behavior ever since. Sends all her wages to her grandchildren. The one before her was just a boy, a plucky little thief who tried to steal my favorite horse. Nowadays, he works in the stables. He has a warm place to sleep at night and no shortage of food these days. Needless to say, hasn't made an attempt since. Schnee huffed angrily behind him. I still say you should have killed him. Naruto tutted and shook his head, but refused to take his eyes off the broken assassin before him. And then where would I be? I'd have 10 corpses, and they're not good for much besides fertilizer. It was so easy to answer like with like, wasn't it? Agony with agony, pain with pain, violence with violence. We must be better than this. Really, he sighed, you should be glad it's me you tried to kill. If you'd gone for my parents, they would have had you flogged and strung up before the castle gates as an example. When the poor fellow didn't answer, he took pity on him and further expounded on his explanation. The point I'm making is this. I like helping people almost as much as I enjoy making allies out of my enemies. So why don't you tell me what's bothering you, and I'll do my best to fix it, eh? The assassin glared at him sullenly. Monster, am I? Naruto tilted his head and blinked once. I don't feel like a monster. Said staring persisted. Honestly, these people. Naruto sighed anew. You don't trust me, eh? Well, not that I blame you. The others took some convincing before they came around. The people will revolt. You'll see, Schnee tutted indignantly and reached for her rapier. Allow me to take his tongue for such lies, Naruto waved her down. Now, he knows nothing. Her anger didn't fade so easily, much to his chagrin, only had eyes for the assassin. Our people are safe, protected, and fed. They want for nothing, what she said. Naruto nodded sagely, stowing his bow over one shoulder. I'm trying to improve their lives. If I wanted to, I could have handed you and the 9 before you over to the guards. It would be simple, easier for sure, even. Problem is, he made a fist in one hand and smacked it down onto an open palm. If I do that, my folks are gonna overreact and crack down on everyone. I don't want that. The assassin stared at him sullenly. Was he getting through to them? Hard to say. Naruto chose a different avenue of attack. Ask yourself this, what happens if you die? Who will miss you? Mourn you? There must be someone. The man's face closed down. I have a daughter, splendid. Naruto brought his hands together in a resounding clap. Now we're getting somewhere. She's unwell, isn't she? The poor fellow's eyes practically bugged out of his head. Schnee glanced his way. How did you? Elementary, my dear. Naruto tapped a finger to his forehead and returned his gaze to his failed killer. You don't strike me as the suicidal sort. Why else would you be willing to take on a job like this? The assassin looked like he wanted nothing more than to swallow his tongue, but beneath their combined gaze, he finally relented. She's very ill. I can't afford medicine. A sad situation, but it left holes in his tail. That still doesn't explain why you sought my head. Silence reigned supreme. What's your name? Garnet Sestre, Garnet. Like the jewel? Not bad. Wasn't that another word for emerald, though? Meh, probably not important. It wasn't like helping this random guy was going to change the future any for his descendants. You gonna turn me in? Schnee butted in before Naruto could think to answer. Why not bring your daughter to the castle? Surely the king and queen could. Garnet scoffed at that. It was a sharp, bitter sound emerging from his dry throat. A mere pauper like me? The guards drove me away and gave me this besides. He jerked a thumb to his scarred cheek and turned a bleak look on her. You were lucky. You were chosen. The rest of us are driven away whenever we try to entreat with the gods. Naruto's smile died an ugly death. Is that so? I'll be having a word with the guards. Who sent you? Garnet hung his head. It doesn't matter now. My life is already forfeit. A woman offered me a great deal of gold on the condition I bring her your head. She gave me that. So speaking, he jerked his chin toward the broken twisted knife he'd wielded only a short while ago. Called it a black knife, said it was magically enchanted, that it would kill you. A single stab was all I needed. Naruto reached down to retrieve the ghastly thing and held it by the hilt at arm's length. It really was an esoteric piece of work, warped and twisted in the strangest places, possessing 3 outward-facing prongs, 2 of which served as a guard of sorts before tapering off into a third, which then flowed down into a slender curve, one that looked more designed for slashing instead of stabbing. A strange dark red murk gleamed across its length as he held it up to the sun, as though it were trying to drink in the very light itself. This was a weapon made for one purpose, and one alone. Death? Is that magic? Shni sensed it and quivered behind him. This shouldn't be possible. Naruto finished, the last dredges of his amusement draining away as he gazed down at the weapon. It was a simple matter to open a storage space via one of his spell, he called it hammer space, and stow the tool away, for ladder magic was presently exclusive to his family, and while he was considering unlocking Shni Razor's potential, the fact remained that he hadn't yet. Therefore, it shouldn't be possible for anyone else to possess that power. Mom had been abundantly clear on that last bit. Magic was a gift long since lost, save for the 3 of them. So who is this bastard? He glared at Garnet with renewed intensity, eyes burning red. What did this man look like? The assassin wilted beneath his gaze. I don't know. I only spoke to her once, and she kept her face hidden the entire time. When Naruto made an irritated noise at the lack of information, Garnet proved quick to hasten on, babbling a bit. I remember her clothes, though. She wore dark violet robes. They smelled strange, almost like ash. She was generous, too. Paid me half right up front, said I'd get the other half when I brought your head. Half up front, you say? A nod. Did this woman give you a place to meet when the deed was done? Another nod on Garnet's part. She did. An absolutely evil grin split Naruto's face. Great. Then you won't mind bringing this wicked woman my head. Shni squawked in alarm, eyes wide. My lord? Oh, hush. He shushed her. It won't actually be my head. I've got an idea. A mad, brilliant idea, one just crazy enough to work. And if it helped him track down this chaotic vixen, all the better. If someone else in this world could use magic, then he had to know who they were. Had to meet them, at the very least. Someone might say that was foolish of him. Perhaps it was, but it was times such as these that he couldn't help himself. Curiosity got the better of him. He had to know. He wanted to know. He needed to know. Shni, however, dithered, wringing her hands anxiously. Shouldn't we let your lord father know? We could, he shrugged a shoulder. Or we could solve this ourselves, save the day, and be big gods damned heroes. She perked up. Just the 2 of us? Alone? Yup. Her ears wiggled happily. On second thought, that sounds grand, Naruto tutted. You're entirely too honest with yourself. Honest with whom? Naruto froze. Shni squeaked. Garnet grovelled into the dirt and buried his face deep, looking like he wanted nothing more than to shrivel up and die. In hindsight, Naruto couldn't really blame the poor bastard, because you see, he knew that voice. Just as he knew the shadow that had fallen over them. Salem had returned from her journey, and his mother, well, she didn't look happy. Not a jot. Distantly, he was aware of someone standing behind Salem, but he didn't dare take his eyes off her to gaze at the guest she'd brought him. Because, you see, Mom was smiling. It was not a nice smile. Not at all. Gulp. Things just got a lot more complicated. Nero, she hummed his second name slowly, the word emerging as a silken purr, veritably vibrating with subtle menace. Surely you weren't intending to sneak out of the castle, were you? That would mean you intended to deliberately disobey me. You know better than that. Shni tried to raise her hand, tried to save him. Actually, your grace, it was my idea. Please punish me instead. Salem's gaze fixed firmly upon the poor maid. And who are you? You weren't here when I left. Naruto coughed into a fist, trying to save her in return. Well, too little, too late. Salem saw the two of them standing together, so close to one another, and came to her own inevitable conclusion. As all mothers are wont to do. He knew at the moment her red eyes widened. Mom, no. It's not what it looks like, i.e. The terrifying impasse shattered with a sudden shriek of delight as Salem swept him up into her arms with a giddy squeal. My baby boy brought a girl home, Tilda. Naruto sighed into her embrace. Moom. Test your might. It took Naruto the better part of an hour to calm Salem. Even then, much to Naruto's eternal chagrin, his newfound mother most assuredly did not let him go. Nor did she put him down. Nay, would she release him in any form or fashion. If anything, Salem only clung on tighter, determined to do her damnedest to make up for lost time. Under any other circumstance he might have found that funny, but for one thing. Salem had strong arms. You'd think she wouldn't, given she hadn't trained a day in her life. But apparently up and vanishing for a year counted as a training arc, because he didn't remember her being this strong. My baby boy. Giggling merrily, she all but crushed his face into her bosom as she swayed to and fro, shaking him like a rag doll. Mom is so proud. Suffocating. Couldn't breathe. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Sure, that's great. Real proud. Now can you let me go? Nonsense. He felt his spine contort painfully under her embrace. I have an entire year without hugs to make up for. Did you think I would have my fill after merely an hour? And besides, you brought a girl home. Schnee absolutely squeaked in the background. Kurama would have had a caustic comment for that, but also a plan. Lacking both, the poor prince pounced on the only option available to him. Ergo, he threw said Schnee under the bus. Plucking his head from his mother's magnificent memories, never thought he'd be using those words in a sentence. Naruto used the last of his breath to turn her glee elsewhere. Aren't you forgetting something? Salem stilled. Am I? You haven't even asked her name yet. Salem frowned. Considered now. Tilted her head. And dropped him. Task failed successfully. You're right. I haven't, have I? She practically purred. Let's remedy that. Schnee sputtered and stepped back, realizing she was being thrown to the wolves, but it was too late. You there, girl. So speaking, Salem rounded on the poor elf faunus in question, red eyes narrow and intent with single-minded fervor to thrust a gray finger in her face, all but demanding an answer before she even asked the question. What's your name? The poor maid tucked both arms behind her back and bowed her head. Schnee, my goddess. Salem considered her intently. And your full name? Schnee Rizar. Salem scrutinized her severely, gaze drawn to mere slits. Naruto almost felt bad for the poor girl. Almost. He was too busy regenerating from cracked ribs and a bent spine to contemplate much else at the moment. Still, it didn't preclude him from listening in with one ear as he basked in his reprieve. By now Salem all but towered over Schnee, awaiting her response. You have designs on my son, do you? Naruto fought down a disbelieving snort, knowing it would only draw attention to him and lead to him being glomped all over again. Schnee? Liking him? Preposterous. She was young, she didn't know what love was. Hell, he had been reincarnated and even he barely understood the concept himself. At this point the poor girl was probably just trying to curry favor to survive Salem's scrutiny. Not that he blamed her, of course, he didn't. She was just a child after all. You aren't angry, Your Grace? Naruto did a double take. Wait a second. On the contrary. Salem crouched down before her and cupped her cheek with her right hand. I approve. My father tried to make many a match for me when I was but half your age. She shrugged a pale shoulder. Such were the times, I suppose. Frankly, I was beginning to fear my darling Nero might not be interested in marriage at all. To think he'd go out and snatch up a bride for himself. Excuse me? Well done, child. As he looked on aghast, Salem kissed Schnee's forehead. Your goddess is pleased. You have my blessing. Best of luck to you. What? Schnee practically flung herself at Salem's feet. Praise be. His mother preened, pleased by the display. Yes, yes, I'm quite magnificent, aren't I? Do stand up, dear. You'll ruin your uniform. Peering past her, she fixed Garnet with a glare. And who might you be? The poor fellow looked like he wanted to shrivel up and die. Not that he blamed him, Mom had that effect on most people. Also, excuse me, I didn't agree to any marriage. No vows were said. He's an assassin, ma'am. Garnet wheezed. Naruto whipped a stern glare Shini's way. Much to his chagrin, she ignored his ire and dutifully relayed most of Garnet's story to her from start to finish. Before long, not long at all, Naruto once more found himself the sole subject of his mother's glare. Is this true? He sighed, slightly stung by Shini's treachery, even if she didn't believe it to be such. Snitch. Party pooper. Goody two shoes, ahem. Almost lost myself in another childish outburst there. Gotta watch that. Coughing into a fist, he dragged himself upright off the cracked stone floor, dusted his clothes down, and fixed the queen with his most regal stare. She left out the part where he was tricked by someone who claims they can do magic. Salem's gaze sharpened to scarlet slits. Did they now? Garnet nodded into the cobblestones, not daring to speak, let alone look her in the eye for fear of being struck dead on the spot. Naruto stepped between the two of them just in case she got the idea regardless. I promised to help him. Her gaze didn't waver. And why is that? Aha. I was waiting for that. You've activated my trap card. Mother of mine. Naruto clasped both hands behind his back, adopted a pouty expression and kicked at the stone floor. He has a sick daughter he's also struggling to care for. That's why he accepted the job in the first place. Isn't that sad, Mom? If he dies, no one will be able to look after her. Salem wavered. A daughter. Garnet, perhaps realizing what he intended, nodded fervently into the floor. Time for the final blow. Wouldn't it be nice to have more children around? She could be a maid for my future sisters. There we go. Entwine the thought of another maid with that of other children, her children, the many daughters she had yet to have. As ever, the idea of babies were her weak spot. With that last little nudge, his mother folded faster than a house of cards on a rainy day. Why didn't you say so? Her voice peaked with equal parts intrigue and concern as she all but rounded on Garnet. Bring your daughter here at once. Ozma shall heal her. Naruto considered offering his own services. After all, he could do it just as well, but refrained at the last second. His parents already didn't know he could regenerate. If they realized the true depth of his abilities, they'd never let him out of their sight again. They might come to fear that he would leave. He had no intention of doing so anytime soon, mind you, but it was best to keep that thought from their minds for a while. But Salem was still speaking and he forced himself to focus. Henceforth the two of you shall serve in the castle. She is a maid and you. Her pale brow furrowed for a moment before she came to a decision. I suppose Nero does need a pet to practice his spells on. Garnet gulped. Nope. Naruto coughed into a fist. That won't be necessary. I'd rather have him as a bodyguard. Salem waved a hand dismissively, content to defer to him in this matter. Bodyguard it is, then. The ground cracked as Garnet's Sestray practically headbutted it, nearly cracking his skull in his fervor. Many thanks, Your Grace. Salem waved a hand his way dismissively. Do not thank me, thank my son for his mercy. Go and gather your things. I expect you and your daughter in the castle by nightfall. Garnet dared to raise his gaze. My queen? Did you not hear me? Get. Garnet got. Naruto watched him scramble away with a bemused smile. It was remarkable what a little kindness could do. Almost magical, really. Speaking of which, craning his neck, he spared Shini a withering glance before looking back to his mother. There's still the matter of the one who hired him. Salem's eyes gleamed like balefire, almost glowing at the edges. Leave that to me. Tempting, but he couldn't allow that. As amusing as it might be to let this mysterious mage drown in Grim, it would be a monumental waste. This mysterious mage might have secrets, magics he'd never heard of before. Moreover, he wondered who they were. Garnet had mentioned a woman in violet robes, and while that didn't exactly narrow it down, with his superior senses, he could. Magic had a very distinct presence to it, for lack of a better word, and while Kurama had passed on, many of his abilities like those of Old Man Sage still lingered in him long after their parting. He was still able to heal others and moreover, he retained the ability to sense things, not just negative emotions, or wise, but people as well when he focused, for instance. Salem Mom shimmered in his sixth sight, a corona of comforting darkness, tinged with threads of red. Ozma Dad, meanwhile, burned like a beacon, bright and pure. He knew what magic was, what it felt like, and more aptly, he could track it. Even if this mysterious mage were actively tamping down their magic, hiding it, they couldn't erase it. Not completely. Unlike chakra, magic longed to be used once it was awakened. He needed to find a way to sneak out of the castle and find this person. Alone, since Schnee would probably tattle on him. He'd be careful, of course. He wasn't so arrogant as to think himself invincible. If this mage could supposedly make knives that could hurt or even kill immortals, then he would take precautions. A fool he might have been before, but he was nothing if not thorough in this lifetime. Naturally, he said none of this and feigned a limpid smile for Salem's sake. Of course, mother. It hurt a little, lying to her. If only because she believed him all too easily. Good, you understand. Ah, but I digress. I brought you a birthday gift. Naruto's brow shot up into his hair. You did? Indeed? Salem looked over her shoulder suddenly, where a hooded figure stood in stoic silence. Their body and face all but hidden beneath cloth and cowl. He hadn't really noticed them in the chaos, yet now that he was aware of their presence, he couldn't help but stare. I've left you standing there long enough. Reveal yourself. Their head bowed. Understood. The cloak flew into the air. He'd expected a guard. This was not, at all. He found himself gazing upon a tall, beautifully well-endowed young woman with silver eyes. Said eyes matched her incredibly long pale hair, tinged with a tint of light blue bound in a long ponytail over one shoulder. Her attire consisted of a long-sleeved maid's outfit with a navy blue corset, long skirt and knee-length boots of the same color. He didn't fail to notice the long sword carried at her hip. Silver eyes, eh? Now why did that worry him? And who might this be? Though the girl's gaze burned into him, she didn't answer. This is Silpha. Salem swept an arm out toward the stranger and simultaneously stepped aside, allowing said newcomer to saunter forward. She was supposed to be the present for your 10th birthday, given that I missed it. Don't worry, she added almost as an afterthought, she's 15. 15? Naruto nearly choked on his own spit. And she already looks like that? Yeesh. And here I am, not even 10. Life was cruel. Her words caught up to him a moment later, however. Wait, did you say 10? Salem preened, cupping her chin with one hand. I did indeed. It was with fond exasperation that he corrected her. Mom, I'm 9. Nonsense, she retorted, holding up a finger. 10 is a far more handsome number than 9 in the age at which young men begin to court young women. Therefore, you're 10. Naruto slapped a hand to his forehead. What kind of flawed argument was that? Must be a cultural thing. However, he wasn't so much as touching a girl in any meaningful way until he hit his upper teens. Thank you very much, it just wasn't done. If either Schnee or another girl he liked was still making eyes at him come that age, then he'd consider it. Until then? Nope, nope, nope tilde. Speaking of Schnee, she was squirming sullenly behind him, staring at the still silent Silpha. He couldn't blame her for being envious. There were only 3 years between the two of them, yet the disparity was plain as night and day. Hell, he was envious and he was a guy. Curious, are we? Salem continued on unabated, mistaking his silence for acceptance. I found her on the northern continent, if you must know. Naruto tilted his head. You mean Solitas? She blinked, bemused. Oh, are you naming them now? He was indeed. It was a system he intended to bring forward to father once the boundaries were finally drawn and proper maps made. They could hard keep calling them North, East, and West forever now, could they? Sooner or later they had to come up with names. He'd given it plenty of thought as he pored over them. Sanis for them, Anima for the continent in the east, and Solitas in the north sounded about right. There was also that deserted land across the ocean further to the south, but it had an active volcano and was more an island than a continent at the moment, so it didn't count. Patch wouldn't become Patch for centuries yet, but it seemed as good place as any to test his spells. Besides, everyone knew that volcanoes and dragons went hand. He might actually find one there. Who knew? Just thinking about it made him curious. He hadn't yet created a spell that would let him walk safely through dragonfire or swim in lava yet, but there was a first time for everything. Silpha stepped forward suddenly, one hand resting upon her blade's hilt, demanding his attention. I was led to believe that you were strong. He smiled up at her. I am. She looked to Salem in return. May I? Salem granted her a nod. By all means, you may. Naruto frowned, concerned by the byplay. May what now? Sylpha's sword slashed in at his face. Schnee gasped at the abrupt burst of violence, but Naruto, having seen it coming, muttered a quick cantrip under his breath. Steel is my body and fire is my blood. Her blade ricocheted off his forehead with an audible clang, sending the strike wide. Sylpha's disdain morphed into surprise as she stumbled back. How? Salem tutted. And here I thought you'd parry it. I can if you like. Sylpha swiped at him again and he casually plucked the rapier from Schnee's waist to parry her, forcing her blade high once more, higher than before. Alarmed by his sudden skill, the older girl stepped back, to which he gave chase, lazily flicking his borrowed weapon. She wasn't worthy of his true treasures upward to touch her chin. That's 1 point. He chided the silver-eyed warrior with a merry smile. Wanna go for 3? Her eyes flashed angrily, lips pursing in a mulish pout. That was a fluke. Ah, the arrogance of youth. He lowered the rapier and switched hands, bringing his dominant arm behind his back. He locked it in place there, fingers clenched into a fist. Then you'll have no problem proving me wrong, surely. The challenge was clear. Come at me. I can take you with one arm behind my back, Tilda. Sure enough, her brow furrowed. My queen. May I stop holding back now? Salem positively preened at that remark. Go right ahead, Naruto hummed. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. Sylpha blurred. Her sword hissed in at his face with tenfold speed to strike his nose. Or so it would have, if he hadn't dodged. His spine bent backwards, shoulders nearly horizontal with the cobblestones for a moment as he let naked steel whistle harmlessly past. Time seemed to slow in his mind's eye and he found himself granted a prime view of her eyes widening, even as he beheld his own manic grin reflected within her gaze. In an instant he kicked off the ground, snapped his body back into place and thrust his borrowed rapier forward, meeting her blade tit for tat, edge to edge, once, twice, thrice. Their blades collided rapidly time and time again, so much so that he soon lost count of the collisions and went on the attack himself, aiming for her wrists in an attempt to disarm her. She narrowly blocked each attack in quick tandem, sweat beading upon her brow. Flummoxed by his speed, Sylpha swept her sword southward, striking for his knees, seeking to sweep his legs. Predictable. He hopped over her attack and gently poked her bosom with his rapier. Couldn't possibly ignore a target like that. Ya know? Sylpha yelped aloud. It was a startled, unladylike sound, made all the more prevalent by the high hint of pink in her cheeks as she stumbled back, warding one arm over her breasts. You dare? Hey, this was fun. Maybe he ought to invest more time into swordplay. Cackling, he waggled Schnee's rapier at Sylpha, grinning like a loon all the while. 2 points. Behind him, Schnee giggled into her palm. Well struck. Salem clapped politely, though her words were anything but. Come now, Sylpha, surely you can land at least one blow. Something in Sylpha's sight sparked. Prince Nero. Was it? The hair on the back of his neck rose. Yees. Sylpha braved her blade with both hands. I shall trample you, now. Naruto beckoned, unable to help himself. Promises, movement behind him. Instinct took and pivoted without a second thought, blocking high as always. That proved a mistake, because Sylpha's overhand strike smashed into his guard like a comet to fracture his wrist. Pain snarled down his arm, forcing his limb low and for once, he was the one to retreat. She capitalized upon the brief opening as any true swordswoman would, slashing in at his feet, forcing him to kick backward lest he lose a toe. Dang, he shot a rueful glance at his damaged limb as he lurched backward. That's my own fault for not reinforcing my arm. Should have known better. Gotta watch that. Where are you looking? Sylpha smashed into him yet again with a vertical thrust and he blocked without thinking, realizing his mistake a moment too late. It was a feint. Even as he moved to intercept her, she switched hands on him and drove another two-handed attack down into his guard. While his mind was prepared to react, his body was not. His eyes widened in a brief burst of surprise as his collarbone cracked. It was only sheer force of will that kept him from dropping Schnee's weapon then and there. If she'd been a blur before, she was a storm now. Her blade wove a cage of savage steel around him, forcing him to defend as he never had before. All the while she kept up the attack, never giving him a moment to rest, let alone think. Schnee's rapier began to bend beneath the barrage, then break. He could feel it about to snap. No wonder. Physically speaking, Silpha was taller than him, older, stronger, and had a longer reach as a result. Moreover, she was braving a blade clearly designed to be two-handed, while he was stuck using a rapier, a tool meant for thrusting attacks. No matter which way you sliced it, all those attributes put him at a disadvantage. He needed a better weapon. Needed to actually try. Her sword scythed down with ever-increasing strength and speed, forcing a series of increasingly painful parries on his part with one arm. Spells were one thing, but he wasn't a master when it came to swords just yet. If he were a normal child, he might have folded by now. Sure, he hadn't been normal for quite some time now, but even so, he was being pushed. With one arm. A feral grin split his face. Well, alright, then. Color me impressed. With an exasperated sigh, he flung Shni's rapier into Silpha's face. She didn't hesitate in the slightest and smacked it aside, the act of which only bought him a moment of time. Even as he forced healing magic into his battered limb and willed his bones to knit back together, she moved in for the finishing blow, sword swinging for his chest. Exactly as he knew she would. A moment was all he needed. He bought himself more than enough time. Mumbling under his breath, he performed a quick backstep and stabbed a hand into the air just shy of his right hip, delving his fingers into the golden portal of his magic, where he kept his treasured creations stored in a separate space from reality. He'd stored Garrett's so-called black knife here only recently, but that wasn't what he needed now. Khalid Bulb wouldn't do, either. He needed something more. Within its shimmering depths, he found what he sought. His hand curled around a worn hilt and with a fiery flourish, he withdrew a new weapon as one would draw a sword from its sheath. This sword wasn't nice. Once a glittering gold on silver, it had since been stained black from one too many magical experiments. Still, it would serve. Erudite. Braving the blackened blade with both hands, Naruto stomped one foot down, raised it overhead, and brought it down. Still on the attack, Silpha saw the slash and somehow managed to tumble aside at the last instant. Well, that she did too, else he might have cut her in half. Even then, the subsequent shockwave drove her back, forcing her toward her own blade before her face in the windstorm that followed. Righting himself, Naruto barked a laugh, brandishing his treasured tool in hand. What a rush. I haven't had this much fun in ages. Grinning, he tilted his head. What did you say your name was? She frowned, regarding his sword of shadows with wary eyes. Silpha Langlis, my lord. Heat burned within him. Good, I'll remember that. Now defend yourself. They collided in a storm of swords. Salem watched her son fight with a fond smile. For what mother did not take pride in the power of her children? Nero had been born strong, had grown stronger, and he'd only become stronger still since her absence. Strong indeed. She watched him range around the courtyard, fending off Silpha with a smile. Now that he'd begun using both hands and a proper weapon, he fought with savage elegance, beating her back with ease. Not to say that the northern girl didn't acquit herself well, she did, but it simply wasn't enough. She already knew how this devastating duel would end. Alas, little Shni was left sulking in the background, and not over her ruined rapier as one might suspect. No, 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 her ice-blue eyes were fixed firmly on Nero's back, hands curled into tight fists at her side, her pale visage torn somewhere between longing and anger. Caught canoodling indeed. Ah, young love, the poor girl. Salem knew that jealous look all too well. It was the same look she had worn when some horridly haughty hussy tried to steal Ozma out from under her. That had been, what, years ago, now? So hard to remember. Long before Nero's birth, certainly. She hadn't killed her, of course, that would be cruel. She'd turned her into a frog. These days that pompous princess lived quite a humble life in the castle pond, lapping up flies. Whatever was her name again? She couldn't quite recall. Most mortals were unremarkable, they slipped so easily from her mind. Still, had she known her son already found himself someone, she wouldn't have bothered to bring Silpha home. This, Shni, such a silly family name, it sounded almost like Sneeze was clearly smitten with her boy as she should be. And she had no desire to interfere with destiny. Still, the more the merrier. Best to have a spare should things went amiss. Or in case things went very right. It was a mother's duty to see to her son's future after all, and she'd spare no expense to see him happy. If that meant giving him, what did they call it in the northern continent? A harem? Ah, yes, that was the word. All the women in the world, then so be. She wasn't above having her Grim kidnap a few more, if need be. And if she managed to have a few girls, then naturally, she'd kidnap a few boys for them. 'Twas only fair. For an instant she experienced a glorious vision of the future. Her children would have many children, and the descendants of those children would spread across all of Remnant, gradually replacing these body mortals and their ilk. So why didn't she see herself and Ozma in it, that glorious utopia? It concerned her. Nero barked a laugh, alerting her as he disarmed Silpha, but rather than land his third point and end the duel, he kicked the blade back at her. What's wrong? Pick up your sword. We're just getting started. She hesitated, thinking it a trap. The silly girl. Pick it up. Salem shook her head, choosing instead to focus on her son to the exclusion of all else. Sometimes he really did act older than he was. All to the good, that. In her day, betrothals were often made at a young age, the better for two partners to learn to love one another. Such didn't always work out, of course. She was a prime example of such, but sometimes they did. And sometimes love came climbing through your tower window when you least expected it. Sometimes love defied death and came back to you. Sometimes love was eternal. Her dear, darling, dashing Ozma. She'd missed him this last year. Very, very much. Unbidden, she caught herself rubbing her legs together beneath her dress. Perhaps she could get started on making those daughters today. Ahem. Back to the fight. Now that Silpha had retrieved her blade, the duel had resumed with gusto. She and Nero traded blows faster than the mortal eye could see. Being immortal herself, it was but a trifle for Salem enhance her eyes with magic to follow them. She was no slouch when it came to speed and spells, but her son clearly eclipsed her in both. Might he exceed her? Ozma was both swordsman and healer, but her talents had ever tended toward the realm of destruction and besides that, creating new Grimm. Nero, however, seemed to be the best of both worlds and beyond. Here he was having the time of his life, laughing like a mad god as he waged war against the langless girl. Laughing like a mad god. A foreign feeling gnawed at Salem as she watched him fight. It wasn't fear. Surely not. Never. Silpha surged forward and the sound of steel striking steel filled the courtyard anew. Nero kicked off the ground and with a subtle display of gravity magic, levitated to make up for the difference in height, then struck back with a dizzying barrage of blows that soon left the langless girl on the back foot all over again. Slapping aside an overhead swipe that would have surely taken an arm, he struck back with a jab that bloodied the langless girl's arm. Spreading a stain of scarlet across her sleeve, she stumbled, and he swept her legs, driving her to the ground. He landed nearly atop her chest, crossed both legs beneath him, and pressed his blade to her throat, pinning her in place. 3. He tutted, lifting the blade just so to draw a bead of blood across her jugular. That's your loss. Schnee cheered and thrust a fist into the air, doubtlessly pleased to see her rival in love laid low. I surrender. Nero lowered his weapon, believing himself victorious. Salem wasn't quite so certain, because you see, Silpha was staring at her son. But not just any stare. Oh no, no, no. There was something in that stare of hers, oh dear. She knew that look, too. Lord Nero. Without warning, Silpha surged up, grabbed him by the face and squashed his regal visage against her bosom. You're so wonderfully talented. She cradled him close with a giddy cry. That settles it. Marry me, Tilda. Nero reacted as expected, much to her amusement. Marry? Maybe when I'm older. Much older, then I shall wait. She crooned, swaying in place, swinging him to and fro in her arms. There's no rush. You can grow at your own pace. Behind her, Schnee finally had enough and stormed in. That's enough. Unhand him at once. Excuse me? Silpha scowled at her. Who are you to command me? I was here fist. You know what they say, first is the worst, second is the best. Salem turned her back on the trio, leaving her son to his fate. He would be fine. Adversity bred excellence after all. Now to hunt down her husband and pin him to the bed. She would have no more thoughts of fear this day. This is troubling. Ozma tapped a finger against his desk as he considered the missive before him. Grim tidings indeed. And not the sort his wife commanded. Would that they could throw Grim at this problem. Writing on paper, let alone letters, was something of a lost art in remnant these days. Most didn't know how to read or write. Such was a secret Salem stringently safeguarded save for a select few, but he'd seen to it that most of those who dwelt in their castle at least learned the art. Indeed, every guard and knight knew their letters, and how to send a missive, even those protecting the border of their kingdom. Especially those. He had argued long and loud with his wife about that one. Their servants needed more than just training. They needed to be capable, able to take initiative during dire times. Which was precisely what made this missive all the more concerning. The message before them wasn't perfect, nor was it written in the usual crisp scrawl to which he'd grown accustomed. The parchment itself had been worn dry by great heat and, written in a halting hand, spattered with both ink and blood alike. If it was a warning, it made little sense. The desert rises. Garrison destroyed. Swords in the sand. Ozma gave it another once over just to be sure. He was well aware of the desert dwellers in the west. Those hermit-like folk who kept to themselves. They'd never troubled him in Salem before, nor had they trespassed into their domain. So why now? Why wipe out a garrison on the border? What had changed? He looked up. You're certain of this? Knight Commander Aldrich Winchester stood at attention before him, hands tied at his sides. He saluted as Ozma looked on, bearded face grave. Yes, my lord. A rider brought this at dawn. Nearly flayed her horse bloody getting here, she did. She rode hard to deliver this. Aldrich was a good man, stout and lion-hearted with piercing green eyes, red hair, and a stern jaw. He had proven himself a leal and loyal subordinate. He prayed that his descendants were of equal worth. Her name? Cassandra Belladonna, my lord. He never quite understood that, though, the need for family names. Back in his day, it has simply been Ozma of Cape Town or Salem of the Lonely Tower. But nowadays it was different. Schnee, Winchester, Belladonna, he had heard tell of strange surnames here in Vale alone. He didn't even want to think of what the manner of myriad names would come from the other continents. Perhaps it was something he should look into. Times were changing. Ozma steepled his hands and laid his chin to rest atop them. And where is this messenger now? Infirmary, my lord, his brow furrowed. Whatever for? She had 6 arrows in her back, my lord. His brow furrowed. Whatever for? She had 6 arrows in her back, my lord. There's no need to keep say my lord. He balked for a moment, quietly incredulous at her survival. This woman might possess his valuable information. Will she live? Aldrich thumped his chest and nodded once. With your lord's blessing. Ozma climbed to his feet. I shall see to her come the dawn. Inwardly, however, his mind began to churn. A garrison wiped out? Destroyed? Swords in the sand? It didn't make any sense. Indeed, it sounded too fantastical to be true. Wait, an awful inkling stirred in the back of his mind, bringing him up short. Destroyed. Destruction. Could it be? No. He was done doing the bidding of the gods. Surely one of their relics couldn't have surfaced. It was preposterous. At ease, old friend. He waved Winchester down. Double the guard, and send another detachment the border. If there are forces gathering against us, we'd best be prepared. Begging your pardon, my lord, but if the queen returns, when the queen returns. Ozma corrected him. We have the Grim. Why risk good men when we can send in the beasts? Ozma shushed him. That was known only to a few select members of their inner circle, Winchester amongst them. He was loyal, but straightforward. When he saw a problem, his first instinct was to crush it. A good instinct perhaps, but when one saw every problem as a nail, a hammer was often the easy solution. At length, the weary wizard shook his head. Should we unleash the Grim upon those of the desert, we may well not be able to stop them. It would set a dangerous precedent. Aldrich didn't budge. It would stop the bastards. Teach him a hard lesson. Ozma sighed mournfully. That may well be, but the doors to his chambers slammed open with a resounding bang. Aldrich jolted in surprise, but his shock paled in comparison to Ozma's own husband Tilda. Salem sauntered through the archway, arms at her sides, hips swaying in a slow stalk. There you are, Tilda. I've returned, Tilda. U.R.K. She was much unchanged, her hair a bit longer perhaps, her eyes brighter, skin paler, but she was every bit the woman he remembered and loved. When Ozma saw the look in her eyes, however, he gulped. He knew that expression. It was the one she'd worn the night Nero was conceived. That she was wearing it now boded most poorly for his pelvis. She pointed at him. "Give me babies. Now." I knew it. Evidently Aldrich Winchester knew that look as well, courtesy of his own wife, because the poor man went pale and snapped off a trembling salute. "WW, would her grace like me to depart for the evening?" Salem granted him a smoldering look. "Yes, she would. Tell the staff they have the evening off as well. With full pay, of course." "Yes, ma'am." Winchester couldn't flee fast enough. He bolted, pausing only to lock the doors behind him before fleeing further still. Ozma shot a sullen glare at him in his wake. This treachery would be remembered. Salem laid a hand on his shoulder, holding him fast. There was no escape, and maybe that was all right. He'd missed her most dearly. "Salem, shish." He tried to speak further, but she wasn't having it. She pressed one finger to his lips to shush him, and with the other, severed the fabric holding up her dress. It pooled at her feet as she stepped out of it, willfully, exposing herself to him in all her glory. His mouth ran dry, then drier still as she took a hold of him by the collar and climbed atop his desk, all but dragging him up with her. He laughed, truly unable to help himself. "I really don't have a say in this, do I?" His wife leaned forward and smiled in sensual, sinful seduction. Her mouth was warm on his. "No, you don't." Salem climbed into his lap and tore off his trousers. That settled things. Ozma folded. Thanks for watching, guys.